All right, everyone. I'm here. It's Will with a Camry sound quality build tour. So today I want to go over what I have installed and my thoughts on all the components. So let's start with the highs. So I have the AMT 110s running off axis. They're 6 ohms and they are fantastic drivers. They really are fantastic tweeters. Mundorf knows their stuff. The installation method is probably a bit controversial, especially for AMTs. I hear a lot that they have to be on axis to really get their full potential, but I don't know how much I agree with that. I think actually they're more forgiving off axis than domes because of their dispersion profile. They radiate out a lot horizontally depending on what angle you're looking at, but it helps the windshield reinforce a lot of the reflections, and they work great. Also, they're massive speakers, so a lot of the loss you get you can compromise and they don't struggle at all. They have so much surface area for being a tweeter that it's really not a problem. I would do this installation method again 100%, and it's so clean. It's so clean on the pillars. They blend right in. This little divot is so I can put covers over them if I'm in a part of town where I don't want my speakers being as flashy. But even then, like, I don't even know if I'd do that again because most people wouldn't even recognize them as expensive tweeters, and they blend in really well with the black. So I honestly probably wouldn't. I would probably just make them a flush mount if I did it again, and leave them be. But fantastic tweeters. The stage height is fantastic as well, being so high up. I think that's one of the strongest parts about this installation method. It's right at eye height. Right comes from about right here. Cons, it's a bit unstable on the right side. The left side is not as problematic, but the right side does have some frequency splitting and instability, but very marginal. I think it does have some rainbowing, but a lot of it can be solved with good time alignment. I think it was a pain in the ass to timeline though. I will say that. It took a lot of trial and error to get the mid-range and the tweeters playing together. But once they did, great results. I would 100% recommend this installation, especially over a soft dome on axis. That had a lot more roll off, and I had a lot more issues with my soft domes off axis than I did these AMTs. All right, so then I got the ESB 8000 series mid-range on the dash, slightly angled towards the driver rather than being flat to help with that cancellation from the comb filter. These are also fantastic drivers. They play really high. They honestly behave more like a wideband than they do a mid-range. But even with that, they play super low. Like, for the driver its size, I was really worried I would have issues integrating it with my underseat mid-bass, and I'd have to go back to 4-inch drivers, but it hasn't been a problem. They don't struggle. And the X-Max specs are a bit over-exaggerated on ESB's part. Like, I do think they have some marketing exaggeration with these speakers. Like, I actually measured it, and it's basically the height of the grill. Their specs are just, if it hit X-Max, they'd be hitting the grill. It's like, it's super unrealistic for these speakers. They'd fall apart before you could push them that hard. The other thing about these speakers is that the UV really damages the cones. Like, on this side, there's like some slight degrading. They were like pure black when I got them because this is blocking the sunlight, but on this side they're a lot more damaged by the sun. So if you do go with the ESBs. Definitely put grills on them. That's probably one of my regrets, is not protecting them early, because they're very sensitive drivers in that regard. That's the only complaint I have about the build quality on these. Otherwise, fantastic build quality. Then under the seats, I'm just showing my chair, but under the seats I have mid-bass and true infinite baffle, and some Audison 8-inch drivers. I don't remember the exact driver, but great great configuration. I would recommend it 100% over the door. The door had problems with rattles and it pissed me off, and I could never get them to go away, and it just didn't feel like clean bass, and I couldn't play them that low. But under the seats, chef's kiss. I am extremely happy with infinite baffle, and that's something I went for in this build, is just having no speaker boxes in the entire car. If you could count that as a speaker box, then maybe I don't stay true to that goal, but overall I want to keep everything infinite baffle if I could, and I'm really happy with that. Now, the cons of infinite baffle, I would say, yeah, you have to have mid-ranges that can play low. If these weren't in the dash and they were on the pillar, the mid-ranges, I don't know if I could cross them low enough without the airspace behind them to help them play low. And they have some cancellation problems that are pretty much the same cancellation problems as the door. Like on the left side, I get an 80 hertz cancellation that's really annoying, and a lot of like the Emma competition tracks really show it. That's one problem, but otherwise I would say sometimes you can have some issues with stage dragging on the right side, where if you have a track that only plays right mid bass, it pulls low and it pulls a lot to the right. But other than those two things, those are the only things that bother me about the configuration, and I think those far outweigh the benefits of just no rattles, clean bass, and clean mid bass at least. You can cross them super low, convenient place to install, stealth. I don't have to worry about losing legroom or anything, so I would recommend all this entire speaker configuration. To dash, mid-range 100% if you can get them. AMT's off-axis behind the pillar, I would also recommend, and IB mid-bass under the seats, I would also recommend. Okay, one more comment on the underseat mid-bass. Yeah, the stage depth is kind of close to you with the underseat IB mid-bass, and I think that could be resolved by having a front sub. Honestly, most of my problems with this, like the cancellations and the stage pulling really right, could be solved with a front sub. So that is on the bucket list. Put it in the passenger wheel well, infinite baffle, IB10AU is my plans. But yeah, I'm really happy with my front stage. These tweeters are no longer running. They were my first thing I installed in this car, and they were pretty good. The stage height was low. The reflections were also problematic on the side windows, and it would cause frequency splitting. But other than that, they performed well. They're easy for how much they were and how easy they were to install. They were fine, but I would be more careful if I did a sail panel location in the future. I wouldn't aim them like this. I would put them more on axis and not firing at the side windows. And lastly, I have this director for my sound control. I totally bypassed my head unit, and I use this to control everything in the system. And then sound source, I have Bluetooth, and that I use as my main. Just get in the car and it automatically connects. I did that with a home audio Bluetooth receiver that I just hooked up to a relay, and it works great. And then I also have a digital signal in over USB module that I use for competitions. So yeah, that is the front stage. Let's move on to the trunk. All right, so this is my trunk. So for sub bass, I have the Acoustic Elegance 15 AU in true infinite baffle, bolted to the floor. So I have the floor of the car, the metal, and then underneath I have a plastic bin protecting the wheel well, and that is where I also cut a hole and sandwiched down foam and then a protective grill underneath to stop any water from getting up. And it hasn't given me any problems. Now, this also might be a controversial way to install a speaker. I know a lot of people probably aren't willing to cut a hole in the floor of their car for sound, but I am, and I'm extremely happy with how it performs. It plays obnoxiously low, and being mounted to a really rigid part of the car, it is super clean. So I'll give a little peek. The mid bass is installed the same way with hydrophobic foam protecting it and a speaker grill as well. So I would 100% recommend infinite baffle, and it leaves plenty of room for your amp rack. So this is my amp rack. I do want to clean up the wiring and make this cover panel a lot cleaner. Not high on my priority list, but is definitely on it. This is the Audio Wave 2-channel XL that is running the tweeters, and then I have the Zapco 6-channel running the mid-range, mid-bass, and it's bridged for the sub. Fantastic amplifiers, especially the XL. I will say that the Zapco is not very forgiving bridged. It does get super hot, especially if you live in a hot state during the summer and you don't have fans. It can overheat, so that's a word of warning. You got to make sure you got air circulation for that, or just avoid bridging it altogether. But I don't want to dig the amplifier too much. It's a beast, but it gets hot. It gets hot, that's for sure. And then I have the Helix DSP Pro Mark III as my digital signal processor. So yeah, this is the trunk. All right, and lastly, I have the wiring mess behind the amp rack. I have a lithium 50 amp hour battery running parallel to the AGM up front. No isolator and no problems. That I don't think it's necessary depending on what your goals are, and it works out great. This battery might be one of the best install changes I had. I had a lot of problems with my car dying when tuning, and my dash cam killing the battery because it's running 24/7, but no, after I installed this, I've had zero voltage problems. And I have my fuses and grounds on that side. And yeah, not the prettiest thing, but you're the only one to see it, so. But yeah, that's the tour. Let me know what you think.